As always, we take our last project or our template project, we copy it, paste it, and then rename it. Map unfold. Same thing with my project. Map unfold. All right. So now the trickiest thing with this is how the workflow happens. So it's not a, there's some background stuff that you have to just trust me will work out, and then you will see how it does work out in the end, okay? I'll show it, but just believe me that that's what we have to do. All right, so I'm going to make a new composition, 960, 540, probably 30 seconds or so. This one's a little bit longer. And what I need to do is, in order to unfold something, we have to keep in mind what we're doing. So if I'm just unfolding a flat image, I can bring in a single image. But what we're going to be doing is bringing in an image and then animating that image, okay? So I want you to think about a composition is basically like a little movie. That's what I will be unfolding as a composition, because then the composition can animate and move around. So inside here, I'm just going to make a solid, and then I'll pre-compose it, and that way that will get me my stuff. Doesn't matter what color I pick here, because I'm going to change something else in a second anyway, but I just want you to see this part first. So I'm going to take this and pre-compose it and call this just map whole. Either one of these doesn't matter right now because they're the exact same thing. I haven't changed it. It's simply a solid that I just colored. So it doesn't matter for that. And now I have this map whole. All right. So now this is going to be the tricky part. In order for this map to unfold, we have to cut out pieces of the map and make a separate piece for each area that's going to unfold. Okay? So to keep it uniform, that's where we can turn our grid on. So if I go here to grid, there's our grid. Now the grid by default like sucks. It's like super tiny. You definitely could try that, but that's like a lot of extra work. So if you go to your preferences and somewhere in here, I think it's under grids right there, you can change how big this is. So our composition is 960 by 540, right? That's our dimensions. So grid lines every 80 with 4 subdivisions gives us 80, 80, 80, and then inside those 80s is 4 subdivisions too. So just so you can see what this does, if I take this away, hit OK, you'll see now we just have these blocks. Much easier to see than what we just saw. Oops. And go back to the right menu, which is preferences. There. Grids. Okay. So what I want to do is just try to find a nice value that I could use. So in this case, 120 seems like a good value. I'm actually going to try to find the perfect one that'll fit this exactly there. Okay. And making it square. So it is 120, 90. It's close enough. Okay. The smaller that size is, the bigger the grid units are going to be. Actually, I'll just go to 100. Let's do 100. That should be good. Okay. Cool. All right. So there's my area. So every one of these squares I need to cut out. Okay. So on this piece of this layer, this composition, I need to duplicate that one for every piece. Okay. You don't need to know that it's one for every piece right now. You don't need to count them and multiply or whatever. You could just simply duplicate a whole bunch of times and then just work your way down the list. Okay. And then when you get to the bottom, if you need more, you just start duplicating more of those. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to number 1 here, and I'm going to go to the top corner. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a box. Now if I click and drag just slightly away from the box and I start drawing it, do you see how it didn't snap to anything? It's just like floating. That's a bad thing because we need this to be perfect. Otherwise we'll have pieces overlapping and it's going to look funky. So I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to go to my view and I'm going to make sure I say snap to grid. That way it'll snap to the grid. And so now when I bring this in, it snaps right to the grid, snaps and snaps. Okay? So it makes your job a lot easier. Now you have to make sure that you click on the next piece and don't start drawing another map piece or another box on that same area. So now we'll go to number 2, and then I'll do the same thing. And then I'll go to number 3, and I'll do the same thing. Okay. So this is a bit tedious, obviously, but this is what's going to help separate our stuff. Now, it is kind of confusing to see all of this stuff because it doesn't really look like we're really doing anything. What's actually happening is as I draw that box, it's isolating that square. But because everything underneath it is the exact same color, we don't see a difference, okay? Just to prove it, if I hold Control, or actually I'll just click here. If I just click the Isolate button, you'll see, or the Solo button, you'll see there's piece 1. I'll click the next solo, turn that one off. There's the next one. There's the next one. Okay, so you can see how I am kind of isolating each one of those areas and separating each one of those pieces. Obviously, this is important too. Like, where did I leave off? Oh, right there. And then I'll draw my next piece. I lost it already. Right there. Yep, see, I messed it up already. So number 5, I turn this on, turn that off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So now that I can see what is happening on each of those, I want to set this composition up a little bit differently just so it's maybe a little bit easier to see. Number 1, if I screwed something up, I want to be aware of that. It's very easy to accidentally grab this and do that to it, and it doesn't look like anything actually happened, but it did happen. Something is off right there, and I need to address it, okay? So I'm going to double-click this composition and actually go and adjust what this looks like, okay? I want to see a variation of color. So if I brought in a picture, that would work fine. You'll notice that I'm not using my map yet. That comes later, okay? So don't worry about having the map in there. That's just an extra step you don't need yet. All we need to worry about is just having some variations of color. So I could go into here and under Generate, 4-color gradient. This is typically like the perfect thing because I can see green goes to yellow, goes to purple, goes to blue. I can see what that looks like. So when I come back to my other comp, I should still see that, okay? Now this is what it's going to be if, oops, let me turn all those off. If it works out, as I start creating pieces, it should flow nicely from one to the other. If by some chance I've accidentally moved something, then this random yellow piece will be in the center, not where it should be, okay? Now, the other way that I show it in the video, let me delete these just so we can see the other way, okay, is once I have one piece done, I duplicate it, I go to that piece, and then I grab my mask and move it over. Oops, let me just hit mask, and then scoot it over. Okay, so what that does is it easily moves the mask over. Now, the nice thing about doing this is realistically I can make one row and then duplicate it and scoot it down and then duplicate it and scoot it down. Okay, that way I don't have to do one box for everyone, which, like I said, is super tedious. So let me just finish this row and I'll show you how that's going to happen. I go there to map, mask, I go there, scoot it over. And this is typically where people in the past have accidentally grabbed the layer and moved the layer versus grabbing the mask and moving the mask. And then what that gives us, see how this is sticking out there? That won't matter later on, okay? Because what we're going to do eventually is scale the whole thing down to fit inside of that window, okay? So don't worry about the fact that that's sticking out. All right, so now that I have 10 pieces that go straight across here, now I can duplicate it and then do the same thing. So I would duplicate this. As you duplicate stuff, it does this weird thing where it's staggered or stacked, so it's like every other one. So what I do is I drag the last one down further. That way it puts all these in a nice little row. There's my new ones, 11 through 20. They're not like 1, 11, 2, 12, whatever order that was. All right, so now I need to go to my masks for these. And I'm just control clicking each one. There we go. And then I'll drag that down. Oops. I will try to drag that down so it doesn't scale. Nope, it's still scaling. Why are you scaling? There it goes. See, now that's not going to work because I'm moving the mask, but it's actually moving the whole path. So let me hit undo, hit undo. There we go. Oh, because I clicked on the wrong thing. I clicked on mask and not mask path. Nope, same thing. Never mind. I will do one at a time, apparently. And go to the next one, and scoot it down. Okay, so again, this part will be a little bit tedious, but it's not going to be too bad. You'll be able to probably do that within like 45 minutes or so. Just make sure that as you're moving stuff around, that the colors blend from one to the other. If I move it the wrong way, let's just say I just grab this and move it, and then I go to my next one, and I move this, what we should see is a definite, like, that color doesn't blend from one to the other, okay? So that means that this one is wrong. I need to duplicate another one of these, go to the mask, and then just scoot the mask over there to make sure that it blends nicely from one to the other. Okay, so that'll be the first part, is to go through this entire thing and just duplicate all those masks so you have basically one box for each. Okay, so it should look exactly like this when you're done, but it'll obviously have this grid on there. All right, so I'm going to leave it the way that is, and I'm going to move on to the next part of this. Okay, so once you have this, everything's nicely laid out, then we have to consider how we're going to move this thing. So the way that the map works is that it's basically unfolding each part. So it's rotating each one of these squares to get this thing to unfold. Okay, in order for that to work correctly, if I go to the rotate on this and I start rotating it, look what it's doing there. That doesn't look right at all. Okay, so two things I have to do. One, I want this to be 3D so I could actually like rotate it back behind it. And two, I need to move the pivot so that it's right along the edge of it. Okay, so I'm going to click on my toggle switches. I'm going to hit my 3D box. And then I'm going to go to each one of these and move my pivot to one of these corners. Now this is where it becomes important as to how this thing is going to unfold. So if I have my pivot, let's say right here, okay, it's going to unfold from the bottom, right? So if I want it to unfold from this line, which would be the Y direction, it won't do that because the pivot is like off to the side. So I have to know how this thing is going to unfold so that it will unfold the correct direction. Okay, now if I put it in the corner like that, I can do either the Y direction or I can do the X direction. You will not be doing both, you'll just be doing one of them. Okay, so what I like to do is, if I just take a screenshot, and this is on a laptop, Alt function print screen. On a PC like you guys have, it's just Alt print screen. And then you can go into Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever. I think I can paste it in Illustrator. Yep, there we go. So I just pasted it in Illustrator so that I could basically map out how I want this thing to flow. Okay, so the way that I do the one in the video is I start off in roughly the center and I just kind of work my way out. And what that does is it gives us a plan of how this thing is going to unfold. So just to give you an idea, let's say, where's my mark pencil? There it is. I'm going to start off here. So I'm basically going to have these 4 pieces that I haven't even colored. I don't know what's going on there. New layer, we'll just lock that. That should be good. Oops, pick a color, pick a color. There we go. Cool. All right. So this will be number 1. This will be 2, let's say 3, and 4. So those will be my first 4 that unfold from each other. So the pivot point for these is going to be right in the center. Okay, that way they can each unfold from that center area. Then from number 1, I have to think, how is the next piece going to come out? Is it going to be this piece? Is it going to be that piece? How am I going to do it? So I'm going to just kind of draw just like what I think I want to happen. Okay, so that's what this is going to do. So number 1 is going to go here, then here, then here, 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 and then there. Obviously not the way a map would work, but it still looks cool. The more intricate you make this, the funner the end result looks. There we go, something like that. Number 3 will go here, 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 there. I think I'm going to branch this one off here too, and branch that one off there.
We made ourselves a little maze.
There we go. Okay, so now that I have a plan of how this is going to happen, now I know where my pivots need to be. I know that for this piece right here, the pivot needs to be right along that edge. For this piece right here, the pivot needs to be right along that edge. For this piece, the pivot needs to be right along that edge. Okay, so there's my plan. So if you need to, you can print it out. You can keep it right alongside you. You can throw it up on the second screen, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to wing it and go this way. So because I need number 1 here, let me do one more row of these. So I'm going to go grab 20 to 11. I'm going to duplicate them. I'm going to scoot it down. I'm just going to go under each one of these masks. Oops. Make sure I'm on the right tool. Scoot it down. And again, I'm looking at the color, making sure the color is updating, blending nicely from one to the other. And I could probably hit M on all of these so that the masks open up on all of these. There we go. Right, just click on the next one. And go to the next one. And I'm holding shift, but I don't need to hold shift. I'm just doing that out of habit. Not that you can even see that I'm holding shift, but I just want you to know.
It was important to you.
Yes. Boom. There we go. Okay. So now that I have all of those laid out, all right, I'm going to look at my map now of how these things are going to unfold. So number 1 will be first. Like I said, its pivot will be in the center. So here's number 1. Let me make sure it's number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5, yes, okay. So its pivot will be in the center. So I hit Y, I hold the control key as I drag, and it snaps it right to that point. This part has to be done before you animate anything because otherwise it doesn't work. Okay, if I start to put keyframes in, then I move my anchor point, it's going to be all off and I'll have to redo it. All right, so the next one, there's 2 paths, right? So I'm just going to pick one and just start there. So I'm going to go this way. And click on that next piece. So this piece, his anchor point will be right along this edge. This piece will be right along that edge. I do have to hold control, that way it goes straight. The next piece will be right along that edge also. Okay. Now it doesn't matter where along this edge it is, as long as it's along that edge. Okay, because I'm only flapping it or rotating it in the one direction. Alright, so that's as much as I can do here. I'd have to go down and around in here. So this next piece here is going to come out of this. So I'm going to grab this one, put its pivot on the bottom. This one, its pivot on the bottom. And then that one. And its pivot's already on the bottom. Okay, so then I'll go the other way. So this is going to go up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. so this piece here, oops, I moved that one on accident. That one will be there, and then this one will be here. Over, this one will be here. And then this one will be on the side. And then this one will be on the bottom, and this one will be on that side. Okay, so that should be all of them for number one, except for the ones that went obviously below this area. Okay, so here's number one again. And what I want to do is lay these out in an order of how they're going to unfold. Okay, so right now if you look at this, number one, my first one that's going to unfold is way down here. It's actually like layer number 25. And then the next one that's going to come out, which is right above it, if I click on that, that's way up here, layer 15. So now I want to start to stack these in an order of how they're going to unfold. Again, it sounds more complex than it actually is. It's actually not too bad. If it helps too, you can just put like a 1 there, so I can hit enter and type 1. That way I know this is the number 1 path. And then 15 was the next one, I believe. Nope, way off there. That one. Oh, because I moved it, it changed the order. That's fine. Okay, so that one, then this one. And then the one next to it. Now, it may need to click back on there just to make sure that it is kind of flowing to the next one. Okay, so that was the last one there. And that's going to go over. Okay. And then I'll go over again. If you remember where you put the last one, it makes it a lot easier. 6. All right, so the last one I put in was 7, and then I'm going to go to the one above it. So that'll be number 8, and then this one will be number 9. Okay, so that area now is isolated. Okay, this little pathway is all together right here. Okay, that's the one I just laid out, and they're in order of how they're going to unfold. So what you want to do is first put in all your masks. Okay, I only did half of them, so we didn't watch all half of them, all the other half do it. Then you're going to move your pivots to where they're going to be for this. And then you're going to start to bunch them together. Now, because path 1 has 2 directions, it's going up like this, and then the other one is going off to the side like that, I will actually have the one here, and then the other path will be like right below it. Okay? So I would go to, here's number 1, here's the next grouping. I would then just grab that and throw it right in line with where number 1 is. Okay, so that's where 1 ended before. Here's where 1 ended again. If it helps, you can always color things, right? Like we talked about coloring items. Where's my colors? Where are my colors? Hairstyle, colors. Oh, right there. No? So I tried. It didn't do anything. Oh, because that one doesn't have it. It still should let me color these, though. 10, this. Label somewhere. Right there. Hmm? Yep, I'm stupid. There we go. It's one of those days, apparently. Okay. So, there we go. Okay, so now I'll know that all of these are part of that number 1. That way it helps me kind of organize things together, okay? Also having them in some order as to how they're going to unfold will help me later down the line. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take number 1, and I'm just going to animate it unfolding, okay? because this one is a corner one, like I said, it doesn't matter if I go this way with it or if I go that way with it. Every one of these, though, should unfold from the back, not the front, okay? If it unfolds from the front, when we see it, it's going to look weird because there will be like a big sharp edge there and other pieces will be attached to it. So all of these should rotate back. If you have a hard time visualizing it, just do it both ways. So in this case, I would go this way. That looks like it's going backwards versus this way, which looks like it's going forward. You can see how the piece gets a little bit bigger here and there. That means it's coming at the camera. If I go the other way, the pieces are smaller. It's going away from the camera. Okay? So I'm just going to animate it like that. So I'm going to start off at -90, maybe a little bit more. I want to start off where it's basically you can't see it, or pretty close like that. Okay. I'm going to set a keyframe here. I'm going to go up, let's say 10 frames. And then I just reset that to 0. Okay, so now we have this. Come on, After Effects, what are you doing, you kid? Oh, oops. At some point, I changed my work area to only 1 frame. There we go. So now that does that. Whoop. Cool. All right. So then what I'm going to do is go to my next piece, go to its rotate, and this is only going to rotate from that one direction, so there's no choosing here. It's simply a matter of punching in numbers. I rewind every time. I look at the axis, so when it rotates, like there we go. So my x-axis, which is right here, which is red, that's the one that's facing along the bottom. That's what's going to rotate around. So you don't have to guess at that if you get used to like looking at this is the X because it's red and knowing that that's what I'm going to animate. Okay. And I know too, like this one was -91. This one, because it's actually higher up, is not going to be -91. This one, to make it look flat, is -87, but it's still negative. Okay. That means it's still going backwards. So I hit X there. I go up 10 frames. And then I reset this to 0 again. Okay. Next one is that one there. Rotate. This one will still be X. I'm going to rewind it. I'm going to set my back keyframe until it's flat. I'm going to set my key. I'm going to go up 10 frames. Set that to 0. Okay, so now this is what I have so far. Right, nothing fancy yet. It gets fancier. Next one. Let me hide these. I don't need to see those. Rotate. Oops. Now this one I put the pivot on the wrong side. I put it on the bottom there. Yep, I put it on the bottom. It should have been on the right. So I just need to move it over. I haven't set any keyframes, so I'm good still. This one, the pivot is going vertically. It's the Y direction, so that's where it's going to rotate. So again, I spin it around in the negative direction. Oops, this one's positive. I've put a positive direction apparently on this one. There we go. I set my keyframe. I go up 10 frames. Oops. The hotkey for going up 10 frames is Shift and then page down. Because page up and page down go 1 frame each. But if you go Shift page down, it jumps 10 frames. Or you can just move it up 10 frames, whatever you want to do. All right, there's my next one. Rotate. Again, this is X. So I spin this around like that. And you'll see this time it's positive. Sure, we just keep going with the flow. Click on that. Oops. And then reset it to 0. Okay. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, don't go in there and try to get negative or positive 96.25 just to get it so that it is invisible. Just get it close enough. The way that it'll flow will be fine. Okay. What's the next one? Then we're going to go over 1. And this will be the Y again. That. Click the keyframe. Come up. Type in 0. Go to the next one. rotate it, key it. There we go. So I'm just going to do 2 more just to get these other 2 out of the way. So this one here. And then that one there. All right. So ignore the rest of the ones, just the ones that we animated. Pay attention to those. They just do that. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to get them to work together, right? Because this is not really unfolding. This is basically just a bunch of pieces just like rotating, okay? So I need to find a way to connect all these pieces together so that they feel like they're actually joined together, okay? And the way we do that is with parenting. So if I grab one layer and I grab another layer and I parent it, then those layers will actually move together, okay? So where I parent things is important, because if I do it, there we go. If I do it at the beginning of this, it's going to remember where they started, and it'll actually do some funky rotations. I have to go past all the animation, okay? It doesn't matter where past it, just past all the animation. And then I need to click on my pieces and start parenting them. Now your beginning pieces here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, don't need to be parented to anything because they're the starting points of the entire thing, okay? They don't need to be connected to anything. But all of the ones flowing after it will need to get connected. And the way they get parented is they go from the end one back. So this guy will be parented to this guy. This guy will be parented to this one, this to this, this to this, this to this, this, and then all of them back to 1. Okay? Again, it's going to sound confusing. Once you've done it, as many layers as we have, it'll get a lot more understandable. So if I start off at the end, which I believe was right here. Yep, that's the last one. And I just parent him to the one that is connected before it. So this would be number 8. Okay, now watch what happens as these animate. Do you see how they're like connected now? So it's not just like they were just rotating. These two, if I deselect, are actually like joined together. Because as one's moving, the other one's pulling it with it. So they're getting like a double movement on there. So I go to the end again, and I'm going to go to number 8, and I'm going to take 8 and put it on 7. I'm going to take 7 and put it on 6. I'm going to take 6 and put it on 5. Do you see why we put all the stuff in order? Because it makes it easier to know which one's connected to which one. Otherwise, we're jumping around trying to figure it out. 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. Okay, so now what should happen is all these pieces should basically be bunched up and then unfold, okay? So I'm going to take everything else that's not a map piece that I've set up, and I'm just going to hide it just so we can focus on seeing what that one area is doing, okay? Look at how it's all folded together, and then it all unfolds, okay? And that's why we wanted to stay consistent with it going inside, because if they were outside some, inside some, you would get this really bunched up stuff in there that it wouldn't look very good at all. Okay? So now that still doesn't look the way that we want it to look. What's happening here is that all the pieces at the very beginning are all stacked on top of each other. Okay? So we're actually seeing like parts of this that are just like intersecting and whatever else. So what I want to do now is I want to then offset each one of my layers, okay? I want to move them so that they actually start animating a little bit later. So I don't want to grab this and offset it like this, okay? If I go here and I go boom like this, and then like that. Oops, that went too far. There you go. Okay. So if I do this, it'll give me the desired look. I'm going to turn my grid off so we don't have to see that grid. That's probably a little bit too far. Let me just shrink that in a little bit more. There you go. So now it's feeling like they are actually unfolding from one another and still kind of moving together. Okay? Now, that gives us the desired look here. But what I've done, in essence, is taken the entire animation of that composition and offset the animation for the entire composition. Watch what that means. Here is my composition. If I change this, it changes what we see in the other one. Just to prove it, if I turn this color gradient off, I go back to comp 1. See how now we have that solid color. If I go back to here, I turn this back on, we would get that back. So watch how I take this little shape. So there we go. And we can fancy it up by because it's a rectangle. I need my pen tool. Where's my pen tool? We'll just pretend that this is our boat. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to take my boat and I'm going to sail my boat across this thing. Okay, perfect. Okay. So what this should do on the other one, what we want it to do, is it unfolds and our boat just goes nicely across the entire unfolding from one to the other. It's not going to do that. Okay, so it unfolds. Now watch the boat. Okay. Now the reason it's doing that is because each one of those layers has offset, is basically like a little movie. Okay, so each one of these is a movie. And each of those is playing a different part of the other animation at a different time. Okay, so that's why we can't just simply grab the layer and offset it the way that I did. I need to fix that. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to left bracket all of this to get it back to the beginning. This is something we have not used before. We're going to use our anchor point tool, but we're going to use it down here. And what it does is it just moves our keyframes down further. That's all it's doing. Okay, so if I scoot this like that, I'll show my keyframe so you can see it. I click and drag here with my anchor point tool. Okay, you get a different icon, and that moves that down. Okay. Oops, sorry. Nope. I did it backwards. Keep these here like this, and then move the anchor point tool back. Come on. Anchor point tool, that. Why aren't you playing nicely? It should be updating. It's not updating the way it should be updating. Maybe I'm zoomed in too much. No. Sorry, forgot one thing. On this solid here, this composition, this has to be longer. That's why it's not working. So I'm going to go to this composition setting. I'm going to make this like a minute. There we go. Now I can go back here. I keep these stacked like this, but then I drag this back, and you'll see how we have this like ghosting one. That ghosting one needs to be lined up to that edge.
So you offset it first, but then you move the anchor point?
Yes.
Okay.
Not the, yes, we move the anchor point of that layer. And what that does is it moves the animation. It keeps the animation offset, but moves the animation from the other one back to the start. Okay? So now when we hit play, the boat should slide gracefully across it. Perfect. Okay? So that's some of the stuff that you will see happen that it's just you're going to be off in some spots. You're accidentally going to move one of these, to the spot you don't want it to be. That's no big deal. Just move it back. But just be aware of that. Now, once you have all of these done and your map unfolds nicely, then the rest of this is pretty simple. We go back into here, we build our pirate map, we do our animation on there, and then that's almost it, okay? And then the last steps of this is that we want to then take this and add a 3D camera. Because we have this unfold, it's a 3D item, we can then add a 3D camera, and I'll make it a 1-node camera. And what this lets me do is rotate around. And then I can also add a light in here. Spotlight should be good. I'll give it some fall off. I'll move it back in Z. And so then what we get is just this more 3D representation of our map unfolding. Okay? And there's some other stuff too in the video I go through, but that's, you know, the biggest stuff. Okay? Now you won't see this. You can see how it's kind of like flipping and you'll see it. You won't see that on the other one because you'll have all those extra pieces kind of already on top of it. So it'll just be happening all at once. We'll throw in also, we don't really need to do any graph editor stuff on this, but we definitely always want to do easy ease. If you've forgotten about that, hopefully not. There we go. We also want to throw in motion blur. Sweet. Okay. So that's going to be the essence of this project. It's obviously a different workflow than we're used to, but these tools and techniques will carry on through the rest of the assignments for the rest of the class. We'll be using more 3D, we'll be using lighting, we'll be using cameras, and then obviously pre-composing stuff, setting up little animations here so that we can reuse them wherever will be very important also. You'll also add sound effects to yours too, which is super awesome. Okay? Any questions? No? All right.